Hello, everyone. Good to see you. Good to see you. I see a few people are starting to join live. I also see that a few of our panelists have also joined. Um, while we wait for everyone to come online, please feel free to post in the chat. Let us know where you're calling in from or listening from. And I'd also like to throw out a little icebreaker to our panelists here. The question is, if you could give your younger self, one piece of HR advice, what would it be?
I love that.
Yeah. Well, Chris,
I'll start.
before we do the introductions, what is some good advice that you would love to give your previous self?
To me, is just stay true to what it is you do and not your job title. Whether you're a good problem solver or whether, just think about like who you are. I think it's pertinent to this discussion, but skills and capabilities, what they are, because it'll open up huge worlds for you. And you'll always perform well when you're doing something you love.
And I feel like the Disney music cruise that you have going behind you really just was chef's
really sets the tone for that.
Delivering that. Linda, how about you?
I was just going to comment. I'm like, the music makes her points come to life. I love it. Something similar is really staying curious, always asking why, understanding different perspectives and appreciating that more perspectives really make things richer. So staying curious and really being fully in tune with a learning mindset and growth mindset.
Great. Well, great. I love that. Well, thank you so much. And I see that we are a few minutes past the hour. So I wanted to jump right in. Thank you to everyone who is joining our next installment of HR GameChangers. This is a multi-themed, multi-episode series. And today is our 7th episode, lucky number 7. We're going to be talking about skills-based organizations and how that is transforming talent management. If you have any peers or colleagues that would love to join the series, please share the registration link with them. I am going to drop it into the chat shortly. And then we will also have a live Q&A. So if anyone has any questions they would like to ask the panelists, I see some introductions coming in. Hi, Lindsay, great to see you. Or you think of anything during the webinar, just go ahead and drop it in the chat. All right, so let's go ahead and move us to our next slide. I wanted to do a couple of quick introductions before we get started. Hello, everyone. I am Janelle Henry. I am head of people at Rad AI. I have spent the last several decades in talent management, acquisition, and HR. Prior to me joining Rad AI last year, I was at Meta, also Facebook for 13 years. And then prior to that, Microsoft. I reside in the Bay Area, and I'm really excited to be hosting today. I'm also a Go Profiles customer, and I just wanted to share before we start that Go Profiles is awesome, and it's really a core part of our ongoing efforts to build and improve our company culture. Rad AI, we love using Go Profiles to give shout outs or recognition. We actually just came back from our company offsite last week in California, and we were all chatting about how much Rad AI is a culture of recognition, and people love collecting their different shout outs. So big fans. It just makes it easier for us to find people, to give them accolades, and then to keep track from an HR perspective of who's really showing up. We love the fact that a happy workforce leads to, happy customers, happy clients, and ultimately better company productivity and profitability. So with that, I'm really excited to welcome a few amazing people to the panel today. So I will read their names and then I will hand it over to them. So first we have Linda Ho, who is Chief People Officer at Seismic. Linda, it's great to have you. And I'd love to ask you a question to get us started. So in lieu of just a traditional introduction, right, of where you're currently working, we want to hear all about your current job, but maybe you could start us off with, what was Linda's first paying job? Where did Linda get her start? And then dovetail into telling us a little bit more about your role at Seismic.
Great, happy to. So again, I'm Linda Ho. Very nice to meet everyone. I guess I'm taking you all way back to my first job. I was scooping ice cream at Baskin Robbins. So I had a very nice bicep.
Nice.
That was my first job. And I'm not sure if it's connected, but now I no longer eat ice cream.
Really?
But my kiddo loves it. And it did really teach me a lot about customer service and ensuring that you're connecting what your product is to the customer and the environment that you want to create as they enjoy their beautiful scoop of ice cream. So it was a really good experience. And that actually leads me to Seismic. I'm the Chief People Officer here at Seismic. I've been at Seismic for about 4 years. Prior to that, I've always been in HR roles. I'm very lucky that I found a profession that really speaks to me, because I think HR is this beautiful intersection of driving business strategy forward through the lens of people. And I think that's what we do as people leaders across all organizations. So thrilled to be here. Seismic is an engagement platform. So what we do is we bring go-to-market leaders together, help them ensure they've got the right content, the tools, the learning, the coaching, so they can work together in service of meeting with customers. Speaking of customers, Oracle is one of our customers, so I'm really thrilled to share the stage with Chris.
Great. Well, inquiring minds want to know when you were scooping ice cream, did you have a favorite flavor?
Yes, mint chocolate chip is
That
still
is a classic.
Yes, classic.
Excellent, excellent choice. Well, it's lovely to have you today. So then I'm going to pass it over next to Chris Havrila, a VP of HCM Product Strategy at Oracle. Chris, it's great to see you. Same questions for you.
Great to be here. And again, apologize for the background music from the nice quiet spot on the ship that I found. But my first job, I may be dating myself a little bit, but first of all, hi everyone, I'm Chris Havrila. And my first job was, I was a skate guard at a roller skating rink. And where I live, doing race car, working with a race car team. So I always had fun jobs, and I have a very, very fun job right now. I lead our product strategy at Oracle for our Cloud HCM and specifically around talent, everything around talent and workforce experience. So whether it's learning, whether it is talent management, anything talent focused. So.
Great. It is great to have you aboard. I think that's a ship pun, if I'm correct, but it's lovely to have you. Unfortunately, Kendra Mitchell is not able to be here today, but I do hope that she will join us on another version, and we will happily catch up with her. I feel as though I should also share my first job. My first job was at Toys R Us. I was a worker. I got to wear a blue vest that had Jeffrey the giraffe, the classic 80s mascot, and carry a box knife and open large boxes full of toys. You'd think it was glamorous and quite the dream job, but it too had its downsides. But it definitely built up my love of customer service and greeting people and just how important, all of these experiences when you shop and buy products, it really matters. Well, great. So I'm going to move us along to our next slide here. And when I do that, I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen so I can just see the panelists. There we are. I think I've got us. Great. So let's get into it, shall we? We have a few questions that we wanted to cover. The first is, how are organizations moving away from traditional job roles to focus on skills as the foundation of workforce planning? Great question. Who would like to jump in first?
I'm happy to. It's a hot topic I talk a lot about. I think becoming a the skills-based organization has been a kind of a raging hot topic and challenge for so many organizations. Before I came to Oracle, I was a tech industry analyst and a researcher, and it's been something we've talked about for a lot of time, but it's something few have licked. Same with strategic workforce planning too, by the way. I think the most recent data I saw was 66% of HR leaders were saying, that their workforce planning has been limited to headcount planning. So, trying to think about capabilities and skills and potential of your organization and what you might need 2 years out has escaped a lot of people.
Chris, you just muted yourself.
Not helpful. And that's not helpful, and I'm the tech girl. But I do think where I've seen most people getting traction is, capturing skill data, just capturing skills data, not trying to over-architect and over-engineer, becoming a skills-based organization. I think to think big, but starting small, moving quickly, and just by having that extra level of data, just capturing it so people could have better conversations, more fidelity in their decision making, I think is really where I've seen the most traction. And then we can start thinking beyond jobs and roles, which is kind of even as a worker, how we've thought about, maybe we've self-identified in a particular job. And so it really does help kind of start everybody, whether it's HR or managers or leaders or the workers themselves, have better conversations. If you just start capturing the skill data, you can talk about, do I need more training? Do I need less? Maybe should I start teaching this, and showing other people how to do it? Whatever that is, you can start having those conversations, and then you can build to where you actually need to be.
Thank you. Linda, what are your thoughts on this?
Completely agree with Chris. I mean, if I back up with the advent of AI technologies and just the amount of change that we're experiencing and the speed of change, it's really important to anchor on skills, because I do think roles will evolve and some roles will become obsolete. But if you really focus on skills, you can be much more agile as an organization. Employees will also feel very empowered because they'll know what skills they need to continue to grow their careers. And that's a benefit for employers as well as employees. And, I agree with what Chris said, like, it feels daunting, right? Moving from a roles-based organization to a skill-based organization. And I worry that's the barrier that prohibits people from making that change. But you can start small. There's many ways, and we'll dive into it today, but you can start small. But the biggest change is a mindset shift that we all need to make. And I think some people are making that already. Because if you step back, when you think about staffing a project, you're not saying, let me get the software engineer one on this project. No, you're saying, what are those skills that I need? Who has those skills? And that simply is what a skill-based organization is. So sometimes I think we make this a huge, big transformation. We make it too scary for people to follow and embrace this change. And what's important is those small changes, like collecting data about what skills people have, and then applying analytics to see what skills we need to grow, where do we need to continue to buy, invest, develop, and how do we make those matches in terms of our needs. And I'll do it. Chris, it looks like you wanted to jump in.
Well, I was just going to say there was one other thing, because you were so spot on, but I do think people have to start thinking about the work that has to be done, not just the jobs. And I think that is probably a little bit daunting too, because Linda's right. We have to start rethinking jobs, and some jobs will become obsolete, but it doesn't have to mean the daunting kind of scary things that it should for people, right? If we embrace kind of this culture of continuous learning and understanding what our skills and capabilities are and what the work actually is, we can see what should be done in jobs and roles, what jobs maybe need to change, how we need to train people. And I mean, something as simple as just understanding AI and just understanding that we're going to shift our mindset to think about the work and the outcomes, not just output. And, you know, the kind of input, process, output world we've always lived in. But, work is a series of flows now that change sometimes week to week, and as things change, if we think more about outcomes, holding people accountable to outcomes and not the work, like let people being able to do the work they need to do, and they'll apply their skills and capabilities to do that if they know what they are trying to accomplish. So it's just one other aspect, not to make it complicated, but to make it okay and kind of free us to think differently.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. Have you, this is something we're talking about at Rad AI right now, especially as we're increasing our hiring, and we also want to make sure that people that we hire, can not only excel in the company that we are today, but the company that we are going to be tomorrow and in the future. And so I'm curious from the panel, maybe Linda, have you seen anyone do this successfully, or even your own company? It sounds like you've got some anecdotes around starting small, but would love to hear where you're seeing this show up particularly well.
Yeah, so definitely hiring. So we can talk a little bit about that. And it's external, but also internal. So whether it's internal mobility or staffing projects. So if we start with external hiring, what I really love is I'm starting to see resumes that has skills built into their resume. And it's not just, keywords to bypass like the AI engine, but it's actual definition of skills. And these are skills that are grown and connected over multiple experiences and multiple jobs. So that indicates to me that the candidates out there are really tuned in on a skill-based organization. I'm also seeing our recruiters and many recruiters out there, they're not just searching for titles, they're searching for skills, and they're digging deep into those resumes to look for how those skills are articulated. Where did you get those skills? What sort of impact did you make with those skills? Those are, I think, really easy, tangible things that you can put in place right away, and they yield you really good results. When I think of internal mobility, which is also hiring, but just looking at the internal population, it's no surprise that the internal talent marketplace has become such a big thing over the last couple of years. Now, I know that there's technology that makes it easy, but you don't have to have technology if that feels daunting. You can simply think about what are those projects that you need to staff and what are those skills that you need for those projects. If you have a role that's open, maybe don't focus so much on that title or the experience that someone had when they were in that role, but what are those skills that you need for the role? And importantly, what are those skills that someone can gain from being in that role? That's your pull when you're re-recruiting employees. What's in it for them to jump into a different role with a different manager, kind of learn something new? Exactly. Well, it's got to be because they're gaining skills that's going to be valuable for them as well as the company. I always say, titles, people can take that away from you. We are in a culture where layoffs are pretty common, but no one can take away skills and capabilities that you develop. And those can serve you in this role and in the future.
I love that. I feel like we're going to see that on a quote here pretty soon, because that was great. We can attribute it to you. Chris, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I think along the lines of what Linda said, I mean, mindset is everything here, right? And it's how you apply your skills. And I think we live in a world now, especially with the younger generations, who are making up so much of the workforce. They're accessing experiences every day, and they look different in different ways. And so even as a somebody in the workforce, thinking about what your experiences are and your skills and how you apply them in different way, help that mindset shift, because marketplaces are exactly that. It's an exchange of skills and capabilities for work that needs to be done. So if we can start thinking more and more like that, the titles become a lot more meaningless, and I think that opens up, what you think you're even capable for, when you start to think of that way. And that's really what a marketplace is exactly that. What is the work to be done? These are experiences I can access as a worker. And maybe we start providing experiences for people, that whether it's learning and project work, whether it's jobs and roles. So it's a whole new mindset shift.
Great. Thank
Just
you.
to
Appreciate that.
piggyback on that, I love, Chris, what you said about generational differences. And there are generational differences, and I think we need to be aware of that. How people learn, how people think about their career, sort of the up and down career job ladder is an older concept. I love the concept of career lattices where transferable skills are at the center of career conversations, but it is different depending on generations, how you talk about it and how people learn. So just to plug, my company had a really good report about generational differences in learning, and I think it's something that we should all, as people leaders, look into.
Yeah, you hear a lot about people not working, and I'm like, they're working, but very purpose driven, and that purpose is outcomes. So, again, it's work, it's outcomes, and I think it really opens up the aperture for all of us, if we can think like that too.
I think it was at Microsoft, one of our HR leaders used to have an expression that it's not a career ladder, it should be a jungle gym, right? A children's toy that you see in a playground where you're just sort of climbing up and down and sideways and upside down, and maybe you get to the top and maybe you fall off. But that always kind of resonates with me anytime I hear it, and I think you both touched on that. Well, I'm going to move us on to our next question. So the next one is strategies to foster internal mobility and continuous employee growth. Here's the question. What strategies can organizations adopt to foster internal talent mobility using a skills-based approach?
I think for me, it goes back to that data capture, right? Because I do think there is an opportunity for technology to help us to see patterns and trends and things we might not see, because whether we're thinking traditionally or in jobs or roles or whatever, when we have that extra layer of data that we can start to use, it's not going to be the answer to everything, right? But it is a higher fidelity of how I make a decision or how I get value out of technology or insights out of technology. It's the skills and capabilities of these machines now, right? Is to see things we maybe don't see, and using a lot of different data sources to do it. So I do think that is a good strategy to have, and not to do the thinking for us, but to give us things to think about, and again, drive those conversations and the action that we need to take or the decisions we need to make. I think is a huge opportunity.
I agree. I think technology always accelerates change, and I think this is a big change. Just to give you an example, so we're lucky at Seismic, we get to use our own product, and we have several products that help drive a skill-based organization. So we have a learning product where all of our learning content sits, but it's not just content. It's an opportunity to role play, get feedback, get coaching, kind of all in one space. But the power behind that is if you combine it with our platform, you're in the flow of work. All of the data is being gathered on how something is positioned as a sales rep. If the narrative landed, if it didn't, then the platform will give you suggestions on what is the learning content that you need that can strengthen this proposal. So it's incredibly powerful when you take data, which I think is the best starting point, but you add in analytics. Then you add in learning, training, practice, and you bring everybody into the conversation. That's the power. I think that's absolutely the future of a skill-based organization.
So you touched a little bit on this, but what role do you think technology does play in that whole process?
Yeah. So what's interesting is it used to be all about like conversational intelligence, right? Which is just the translation of, your meetings. Zoom has it turned on for free now, and a lot of other platforms do. That's capturing data, which we all recognize is really important. But then what do you do with that data? How do you know if something that someone attended a training on really landed and it translated to the work that they're doing. That's where the beauty of some sort of enablement technology or any other platform really can take that data, digest it, put some analytics on top of it, and then serve you with, well, here's some things that you can think about, employee, to grow your skills, or manager, here's the trends that we're seeing in your organization in terms of completion of learning, in terms of how it's being applied to work. And then that creates dialogue. At the end of the day, what we want to do is have information to create dialogue about how we can help our employees do their best work. Everybody wants to do their best work, and this just makes it much easier.
That's a great point. It's striking a chord in me. I remember at Meta several years ago, we had someone on one of our employee resource groups create a tool kind of similar to what you were talking about that was used to help veterans understand how their skills would translate. And it's one of those moments that I remember as, wow, why doesn't everyone do something like this? So you can take some experience and say, well, if you did this role in the military, right, you would actually be great at this type of role at Meta. And I love that. I think that AI and so much technology advancements in the last several years, I think are going to allow us to get those tools faster than we ever had before, which ideally will allow us to invest more in our people rather than always looking outside of our organizations. Chris, did you have anything you wanted to add to this topic?
Yeah, I think, even how the AI is evolving, right? Linda said it too. I said it earlier. I mean, this is all, how do we drive better conversations? Again, I think sometimes people think about AI just substituting work and current work outcomes or current thinking, validating something, versus trying to think of things in whole new ways, right? Because it's like a coworker, right? And so as we've seen, even things like AI evolve and using, agentic AI. I mean, it's a great thing about being a technology company. We can really start thinking about how to use the technology very differently. Where we have, a lot of, you think about an HCM or a talent management system, it's got a lot of passive transactional historical data, that we haven't always used really well. But now, we can have conversations, with the AI and just ask it a question instead of it, being this kind of, even overwhelming analytics, type of thing, so that it will actually, in an organic way, really start to help us think about having better conversations. Because even if we can have a conversation and ask a question to this agent or advisor or coach, and start positioning the technology that way, the opportunity is, I have a coworker now that can help me start to think about things in different ways and maybe unlock outcomes I couldn't have even gotten before. But I do think, the key is understanding what the technology is, what's not automagical, but, actually, just helping us think in different ways and ideate, right? I think our new jobs are to have these discussions, with machines in the room too, and having them, help us think differently about what we're about to do, maybe a decision we have to make, and I think that's the huge opportunity.
I saw this demo of an AI coach. And at first I was like, oh, how's this going to go? But it was incredibly freeing. You're not talking to your manager who might be judging you for your performance. Right?
Every question I ask my manager, what are they thinking? But I can ask this technology and just start exploring and being curious without the intimidation factor.
That's actually it. And it made me feel so free that you can dig into learning with no inhibitions. And that's the future.
Love it. Love it. Well, let's move along to the next question, which is, what are the key components of an effective skills assessment framework for continuous employee development? Chris, would you like to go first?
Yeah, what's a successful framework?
Mhm.
For me, and I hear a lot of companies, talking about creating a culture of continuous learning, and I think, you know, we have to realize that culture is what we do, just not what we say. And I think it can't be so, if we build it, they will come, but purposeful. So I think, what do people need right now to do their jobs right now? Right? Thinking about what people's immediate needs are, to master, the work that they have to do, but also thinking a little bit more intermediate, and like, how are they going to master this role, maybe that they're in. But then there's that, what's next, right? Start thinking about mobility and how we can apply people's skills in different ways. So how are we using our learning tools to coach people? Because your manager may not always know that, right? Or they may not only be thinking about maybe an immediate need or something else. But I think you have to have all three in that model of, kind of what is immediate, what might be kind of coming around the corner, and then what could we potentially be developing in terms of capabilities. And it's not to change the dialogue from a skills-based organization, but it's really, how do we drive to a potential-based organization? How do we start understanding teachable fit? And I think having that kind of framework, using technology to maybe help do that kind of coaching, and to explore possibilities, are a huge future. But that's the model is, I think, for an organization to be happy and to find the kind of technology that can help do that, but also for a worker not just to kind of have this big, mass of training sitting there and not knowing what to do and how and why to do it. Giving people that kind of a framework for thinking about, what do I need right now? What will help me master this role? Because everybody's always thinking about what next. And so I do think there are systemic issues that we have to face, though, to have a framework like that work, right? And those are maybe traditional policies or ways that we operate. But I think this notion of like coaching and advisors and agents will help unlock some of that.
Thanks, Chris. How about you, Linda?
I like what Chris said. Chris, you also talked about outcomes, and I think that's an important part of the framework. So what are those skills now, later, etc., and what outcomes do they lead to? And that really captures people's attention. It doesn't become skills as sort of like a soft thing. No, it's actionable, it's outcomes, it drives the business. And I think sales is actually one of the organizations that has really embraced skills-based learning. Why? Because they're all about outcomes, and it's very measurable, it's objective. I see so many sales organizations moving to skill-based organizations way beyond before the rest of the organization, because everything can be measured in this sales organization, and the value of making that shift is immediate and very transparent to people. So skills, outcomes, those are super important elements of the framework. The last thing I would say is, how do you embed it in the culture? We haven't touched on rewards and recognition yet, but I think it's so important. As we all know, right, driving change is all about those little wins and integrating this change into the fabric of your organization. The best way to do that is, what do you reward? What do you promote? What do you recognize? If you're, rewarding someone based on their title, saying they went from, accountant 1 to accountant 2, you're losing an opportunity to put skills at the forefront. What were those skills that had, that moment where it shifted for them, moving from accountant 1 to accountant 2? And what was the impact that they made? What were those skills that they learned? What are those skills they're going to learn in that new opportunity? It really just changes the narrative, and then it changes the culture, and it brings that culture of learning to the forefront. And it's not through like a fancy redesign of your job architecture. It's just through how you communicate and how you work.
That's because it is it's what we do, not just what we say. And we have to back it up with that recognition and reward. I mean, we did the very same thing even in our HCM and built, capabilities in there to do exactly that based on cultural values, and then you can start to reinforce the behavior that you want, where everything's not some big top-down transformation, that you're just organically changing behaviors, and then it's not so big. It's not this, big behemoth, overwhelming thing. So every little bit counts.
Thank you both. All right. For the next question, how can skills-based recruiting improve hiring outcomes compared to traditional methods? Chris?
I'll jump in. Just it's very top of mind for us. We're in the midst of continuing to use new technology to apply it in different ways, and I think right now, from a recruiting standpoint, and again, whether it's internal or external, but focusing on the external is how do we arm candidates with the same data that we have, taking their skills and capabilities and actually giving them some guidance on how do they fit in this job that they're applying to, and are there other jobs that are in the organization that could take advantage of their skills and capabilities, and doing that in a conversational way so that, we think about traditional ways matching was done. It was usually kind of job profiles that came out of a comp database and didn't actually tell you what you needed to know. But even putting more, job profiles created, or helping a worker think about their skills and capabilities in terms of particular jobs and roles they're doing. So I think there's an enormous amount of opportunity telling them where the gaps are so that they can be like, no, I actually have done that. And making it an iterative process, not expecting them to come with a profile that has been articulated perfectly for everything that they could potentially do and not do. That's a lot of pressure and expectation, and just things that we don't do normally well. So if we don't have great job profiles and we don't have great recruiting profiles, how can the technology in the center start to make those connections a little bit better? And that could be an iterative process, but we have the technology to do it now. And I think it's going to change the game, well, no pun intended for the game changer, but in how we can do, skills-based hiring in a better way.
Thanks. Linda, do you have anything to add to that?
Just a couple of thoughts. I feel like right now it's probably more of an employer's market, but there's cycles in all businesses. And very soon, I predict we're going to get into a cycle where the employees really will have multiple opportunities to choose from. And when you think about it through that lens, how do you position your role to an employee that has multiple opportunities? I'd love job descriptions to be reviewed differently, to talk about what are those skills that you need to be successful, but what are those skills that you're going to gain when you accept this opportunity in this role. Right now, job descriptions are relatively flat. They talk about what the role is like, what you need to be successful, what your experience, could be, right? That would make you a fit. I'd love to reimagine that job description because I think that could be really powerful. And I think it's yet another anchor into skills.
Oh, sorry, Chris, let me here. I think it's an interesting point. And, some coworkers and I were just talking about this, the push and pull between a candidate's resume and the job description. And I think we often tell job seekers, write your resume as though it's not a job description. We try to say, write it with the impact that you had. And it's not just a list of things. But then that's hard because you look at a job description and it is a list of things. And so something is going to need to break the system. And I agree. I think employers have a real opportunity to get ahead of this trend, to be bold in the way that they are reaching out to candidates and leading with the skills base first, to then maybe allow people to get rid of the traditional resume. And wouldn't that be something if we had just a very different way for people to showcase who they are and what they're all about? Chris, you wanted to add something before we go to the next question?
Yeah, and I think it's about outcomes, right? What are the outcomes? If people are going to be more purpose driven and think about how their skills can be applied, we've got to do a better job of saying what these roles are. What is the purpose? What are they going to be trying to solve? What are they doing? So that people can think about those skills and capabilities. And I do think we have an opportunity with the technology again to help candidates think about that if we give it the data to do so. And that data is going to be on outcomes and purpose and things like that. And I think connecting that will start allowing for that marketplace, whether it's with internal or external people, and regardless of where the pendulum is at that moment, our ability to articulate what we can accomplish and what we want to do and why. Again, whether you're an HR person, a manager, a leader, or the worker themselves. I think, that exchange for skills and capabilities for these experiences they want to access or these outcomes that organizations need will be that connection that will help regardless of where the pendulum is, because it's a good point, Linda. The market it changes all the time. The supply and demand equation is constantly moving.
Thank you. Well, I want to ask one more official question before we can open it up to any Q&A. I did get a question here that I will make sure we ask here at the end. But the last one is, how do you think skills-based approach helps supports DEI? Linda, would you like to share first?
It's a great question and very timely right now, especially in the US.
Absolutely.
Transferable skills, right? I think I started by saying, curiosity, gaining different perspectives, understanding the why behind someone's thoughts and what their recommendation is, that makes the solution stronger. There's proven research that diverse perspectives make companies better, make solutions better. So when you think about that and apply that to a skills-based organizational framework, what are those transferable skills that really enriches a particular role or a skill? There's no one way to do something, right? So when you bring in those different skills, you bring in different perspectives, and you can make that end product, that outcome that we've been talking about, even better. So I think it's very pertinent to the topic that we've had, and I'm really glad that you asked the question.
Chris, anything to add?
Yeah, I'm thrilled that you asked the question, because I do think that, especially with how controversial it's gotten, which is, sad, but maybe there's an opportunity in this. And, I think there's always the comfort that, DEI, posed, that was about bringing your whole self to work and everything, that goes along with that, and giving people opportunities. But we get down to that exchange of skills and capabilities for outcomes and experiences. It takes the loud voice in the room out of the way. It helps provide for cognitive diversity when people know how they're contributing and how to collaborate together towards an outcome. It's when you can be a little bit more purpose driven like that, all of a sudden you're kind of, maybe cliche, but when you've got a common, focus and mission, right, it makes everybody working towards the same thing. And I think that's the most important thing, is to get that cognitive diversity that we need from people with different ways of thinking, different backgrounds and experiences, but all applying it towards, the same thing, is when, we get the real true value that DEI has always been about. And, not what people, may have made it or made it to be anything but what, beautiful thing comes out of that. And those are these outcomes, and they're richer and maybe better than we ever thought. So.
Thank you so much for sharing. Well, I have one question in our Q&A round that I wanted to get to, and then I think we can go ahead and wrap it up. So this question is, if we're thinking about the future, right, and we were to come back and do this same panel 5 years from now, what do you hope we're talking about? And maybe it's in relation to skills-based, maybe it's just in relation to any of the many discussion points we had today around improving the employee experience, opening things up to DEI. Linda, I'd love to jump in with you. What do you hope, if we have a repeat of this panel, we would see as kind of a dovetail from this topic?
Oh, this topic can take the full hour. But if I had to pick one thing, I would say the voice of the employee. When we talk about skill-based, we always talk about like what the employer believes are the skills for the role. And, the skills that you need now, the skills that you need in the future. I think very quickly, if it's not already happening now, the voice of the employee will be stronger. What do I think I need? And that actually might be a little different from what the employer and the manager needs.
Sure.
And that's such a beautiful dialogue to talk through, because again, it's the different perspective of the person's doing the work and the skills required to do the work and what it will require in order to move the work forward. So I think, having that perspective from the employee, and perhaps it's a technology enhancement that will make that come to life. Perhaps it's just this culture of learning. Doesn't matter what your title is, but you can talk about learning. That will really bring those perspectives together. And I think that's more powerful than what we have now.
Thank you. Chris.
I think for me, and it's along those lines as well, is that that we've finally kind of licked the employer-employee relationship and how damaged that is, to where there's a more trusting relationship. And so you can really truly have that exchange of skills and capabilities, and I'm able to access experiences, and you're able to get the work of of your organization done, that we're all focused on the same things and working together to do it. Because I don't care what the challenge or issue or what's keeping a CEO or a C-suite up at night, you're not doing it without people. And so I just think if we can change the conversation and do give it more fidelity with things like skills and capabilities and outcomes instead of job descriptions and resumes, that we're actually, again, whether it's the voice of the employee, whether it's the voice of the employer, but it's coming together and everybody's kind of focused on the same thing and working together. I think that is the opportunity if we're changing the conversation and we have better data to do it.
Thank you so much for sharing. That was thank you. Go on mute. Those were great answers. I think to kind of chime in, I would answer that in two different ways. The first is I would love to see a world where employees don't feel they need to leave their current company to grow their skills. And maybe that's tightening up the mobility process. Maybe that's ensuring that L&D programs are up to speed, or maybe that's just being really transparent about what you actually want from the get-go, so the employee knows, hey, I kind of just need you to be in this job and I don't need you to grow. Those would be really hard conversations, but I also think important so people know what they're getting themselves into. And I think second, I touched on earlier, I think it would be really valuable to have someone have major breakthroughs, potentially into the tooling or vendor world. I know, when I'm on LinkedIn, I'm overwhelmed by the amount of new recruitment tools and HR tools that are showing up every single week. This would be one that I think is a real ripe opportunity to be disruptive in a positive way, so that they can make it much easier for companies to start adopting this. And I think both of you touched on ways that we can all be doing that now in our own respective corporations. So thank you. I am going to pop the slide back up here if we can get it. Let's see. Great. Can everyone see that again? There we are. So before we end, I want to thank the panel for joining us today. Chris, Linda, you were wonderful. Chris, you're going to need to drop the cruise that you're on. Loving the music. We definitely want to join you on that next one for sure. And Linda, thank you so much. Really appreciated your answers. You guys shared some really great strategies, and I think really valuable for those who are joining live and those who might be listening later. So if you are here if you're here live today, you can also, I dropped in the Go Profiles Game Changers link as promised. Wanted to share with you what our next 3 episodes, their topics are going to be. In March, we're going to have empowering remote teams and hybrid teams, which should be exciting. Number 9 will be HR transformation. And then episode 10 in June, wow, can't believe we're already talking about June, but here we are, is building compensation models, key to structures and philosophies and transparencies. If you have colleagues or peers who you think would find this series valuable, please feel free to share it. But on behalf of Game Changers, just want to say thank you, everyone, for joining and listening wherever you are in the world. We're really appreciative to them for supporting and sponsoring amazing conversations like this. Thank you so much, Linda. Thank you so much, Chris. Take care.